Welcome to the 1111 podcast. Let us join all together by taking a deep breath in and release with a deep breath out. This topic arrived to me several weeks ago, and ever since this topic has arrived, I've received the most beautiful energy, particularly from the masculine community and men in general. And I've also been receiving the most horrific information as well. So if you have any topics that you want to hear covered on this platform, please reach out. My information is in the description if you would like to submit a topic, or if you would like to collaborate and either be a guest on this platform or have me be a guest on your platform. I'd love to collaborate because we are headed towards unity. Unity is what we all desire. And unity is what we need. Now, throughout this conversation, you will hear me discuss masculine, feminine energies. And I may not always specify when I'm describing energy, but please know that these are gender neutral. So if you find yourself embodying these energies, regardless of what you identify as, if it resonates, please take it. And there's been a lot of taking of energy. There's been a lot of abuse on this planet, and there has been a war on the feminine consciousness. And before I get into all that, you've probably heard me say that at some occasion, if you've been here. There is a war, and it manifests spiritually first before we see it manifest physically. Now, this war on the feminine consciousness is nothing new. But what is new is the YouTube channel that I'm running. So if you haven't already subscribed and liked and shared the videos that you're seeing being uploaded on our YouTube page, are being the collective 1111 podcast community. And if you would like to join the empire that I'm building from the ground up, if you have some talent that you would like to give, whether it's healing, entrepreneurship, leadership, administration, whatever it is more than welcome here, as we are birthing a new earth. And that's what we're going to be discussing here a little bit. Now, if you're catching this live, I'm recording this on the pre-game to 420. So shout out to everyone who's 420 friendly. We're also getting ready to celebrate Earth Day, so we're celebrating 420. We're celebrating the earth, we're celebrating Mother Gaia and all the beautiful magical plants that she has given to us and this wonderful atmosphere that she's given to us. So very thankful for all of the gifts that we receive and the abundance that we are remembering that we are, is our birthright, that we are here for. And so in honor of 420, I actually did a virtual concert last year. Now, I tried to capture it. I tried to record it on both my Instagram and my YouTube live. Instagram was a success. Wonderful, beautiful. YouTube, not so much. So I have gone back to compress those into a video to post here on YouTube. So please check out the 420 virtual concert. It will air tomorrow. Catch the premiere if you're able to. It'll be premiering at 2 different times, 2 different videos. There's part 1 and part 2 of the concert. So part 1 will be premiering at 4:20 p.m. Eastern Standard. And part 2 will be premiering at 7:20 p.m. Eastern Standard. When I like to toke on the East Coast and the West Coast 420s. So we will be celebrating both energies. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for all the healing that's coming up from the new moon, from the energy that's open in this time and space. Now, I have mentioned that starting in June, I will be doing a 6-month healing journey for those who want to join. And for those who are unaware, I do provide donation-based counseling, healing modalities, therapies, things like that to help you on your journey, to remind you that you're never alone, and to help uncover some hidden subconscious patterns that may be subconsciously holding you back, or any fears that have kept you to play small. Uncovering those and so much more, from dream interpretation to understanding yourself, from relationships and so forth. So if you are interested in pursuing this in a really consistent, dedicated way, I have created a forum for you to sign up if you would like to be a part of the Full Circle Healing Circle. That's starting in June. It is open from now until June, so you have until June 1st to sign up if you would like to be a part of this and learn more about this. So that's available also in the description. And I want everyone to live free, to break these patterns and these shackles that have kept us bound. And even the people who want to keep us bound, they are tethered to this energy too. And they don't realize that they cannot escape their fate. The only way is through healing. The only way is through love and truth. So, we are uncovering the womb man. Now, I was looking up this topic to see if anyone else had spoke on it in the ways that I feel it. And, of course, what I found, not of course, but ironically, what I found was a lot of men describing the womb men. And the ones that I saw, I didn't watch a lot of them, just to be clear and transparent. I did not watch a lot, and even the one I did watch, I didn't finish. It was an African man talking about his book about the womb men. And the gist of it was about men being wounded from the creation story of the rib that was taken to create the woman. Now, in all of history, that is the only creation that we see the masculine being the creator of the species. And then from there, the woman is the one who's the creator. Now, let's understand, what do I mean when I say the womb men? Because I understood from that little clippet that even that, a lot of people want to paint this narrative of men are the victims and men are, life is so tough for them and they have been wronged and all of this. And that's not to excuse anyone's experience. We all have been wronged. Trust me. We all have been manipulated, gaslit out the wazoo. We all have been under this deep suppression. However, when you want to be given any type of sympathy for it, not empathy, but sympathy, there is a difference between the two. And maybe I'll leave a video of what that looks like. But painting the narrative of what I describe when I think of the womb men. The womb men is an understanding that I have of a wounded man. And that is not in the description of sacred texts and he was wounded because his rib was taken. No. The womb man is anyone that has a womb. So that would be people who identify and are genetically in the feminine embodiment. The womb. The reason that women have a womb is because, and this is scientifically described, what creates the gender in our physical existence. It is through your paternal energy. Whoever your father is, right, is the one who will determine what the gender is of the child. Each parent gives a chromosome. Women have X chromosome, men have X and Y chromosome. When a woman participates in the creation, she gives the X, and it's determined by the father if he gives an X or gives a Y. Why, oh why? If he gives an X, then that determines the gender to be a girl, a female. However, if he gives a Y, question mark, right? No. If he gives a Y, the determination of the gender is going to be a male, a boy, a son. And so I have this theory. It's not proven. This is a side remark, and it's something I observed in human nature, is that a lot of men who have daughters, and this is a general statement, so there are some men who genuinely don't care or genuinely want daughters, but most men want a son. And what I've learned and what I've observed is men that have daughters tend to be men who are players, abusive, dismissive of women, very numb to women's pain, and also have their own shadow of perverse sexuality to work through. And what I've noticed is more of the men who have sons, and sometimes it can be a blessing, right? Because we don't want the wrong type of men to have daughters. We don't need that. But most of the men who have sons, it's almost this badge of honor, if you will, to say you respect women enough that you don't need to learn this lesson through a daughter. Now again, that is very generalization. That doesn't mean if you have daughters and you know you're not a player, that doesn't mean that you're somehow cursed or any of that or something like that. It's just an observation of what I've noticed. I was seeing a lot of men who were like really toxic, had really warped perceptions of what women are here for and what women are to be, and really objectifying of women. And they tend to be the ones who had daughters. And I just thought that was the irony. So, going back to creation story. Creation story, if you look at sacred texts and other texts that describes creation. I was recently watching a understanding of Greek mythology, and it starts out the same way that most sacred text starts, that the world was dark and voidless, unformed, and it was covered in darkness. Now, the place where creation is born is within the womb. What we just described of the XY chromosome, that happens within the womb. What also happens within the womb is based on how much testosterone or estrogen is produced in the womb, testosterone being the male hormone and estrogen being the female hormone, will determine if, in this case for females, if the clitoris turns into a penis or vice versa. So there's a lot of scientific understanding that it is a psychological and also clinical thing that the womb or the wounded man becomes a female because he becomes a she in this instance where the genitals do not form into a male genital. And there's actually a psychological concept for this. The father of psychology, Sigmund Freud, for all of his unique and shadow elements, he created this concept of the castration concept. And we're going to get into that in a moment. But I want to discuss the creation story because being void and formless happens in the womb. So the womb is where creation happens. And that's where darkness happens. Nothing really grows on the surface. When you plant a seed, for instance, in fertile ground, it has to go underground before it transpires. And again, this is the feminine energy. You plant the seed in the earth. The earth is Mother Gaia, who is going to nurture that seed. The seed comes from the masculine energy producing that. So there is a unique balance between these energies. One is not better than the other. One is not more important than the other. And they cannot exist without each other. They must work, coincide together in harmony for the best results. What happens is when it gets distorted, that's when we see a lot of insecurities and violence and other shadow elements show up. So going back to this psychological understanding of the castration concept, or castration anxiety, is something that takes place in the youth, in the subconscious mind of young boys. And with that castration anxiety, the concept is that boys have a fear that their father will mutilate them, will take away their penis, essentially. And so what this really translates to is a fear, a subconscious fear. Now, this goes into a whole different type of story that maybe we'll discuss another day. But just for right now, this fear that resides in the male consciousness is really the fear of becoming a woman, or a womb man, a man that has a womb. So this fear is so deeply embedded and passed on to generations that the opposite of love, as we've discussed, is not hate, it is fear. This fear produces hate. This fear produces insecurities and other things. But this fear becomes so embedded. And so this creates a fear of oneself, because we all have masculine and feminine energy. So if a man is afraid of becoming a woman, we first have to ask, why would he be afraid of becoming a woman? And that would give an indication that society has not been set up for women, that women have been degraded, used and abused, objectified, dominated, subjected to horrendous treatment. It shouldn't be seen as a less than to become a woman, or some kind of fear if that should happen. Now, everyone has their own fears, so I'm not here to tell you what those are, but to just take a general wide-angle lens at this. There's a subconscious fear, and that fear can turn into hate. That fear can turn into abuse. That fear can turn into projection. That fear can turn into a lot of different things. And that fear comes from an internal fear of oneself. So you reject, in this case masculines, will reject anything feminine. They will reject anything feminine. And it comes from that fear of not wanting to be invisible, as women have been, treated less than. All of these fears are subconscious, though. So another fear that is a part of why there's a spiritual and psychological and physical war on the feminine is because feminine energy cannot be controlled. Wow. Feminine energy cannot be controlled because of that darkness, that void, that mystery that naturally feminine energy inhabits. The womb is a portal, essentially. And for people who do not respect the portal, they will abuse it, they will use it, they will mistreat it, and they will try to inflict harm. And they will try to manipulate the portal. So the womb is a portal. And there's been a lot of abuse of that portal and of that value of the divine, because women are the in-between between the spiritual and the physical, to bring form, to birth new things into this earth. So, as I've mentioned, I've encountered a lot of different energies as I was getting ready to talk about this. And one of those was a traumatic story that happened in India a few years ago. And I was feeling so much anger and so much rage and so much despair. And I hesitated to even discuss it because I know there are a lot of sick fucks out there that when you put things into their subconscious, whether they mean to or not, they can sometimes play that out. So I thought maybe I shouldn't advertise this to the general public. But I thought it's already happened. It's already out there. And for those who actually might want to understand this and transmute this energy and maybe protect, maybe this would be good to share. And then I also had to sit with myself, my inner child, because there was a part of me, and I do think that intention is important. It's the utmost importance. So I had to really sit with my own intentions before thinking if I should share this information or not. And I had to sit with my inner child because there was a part of my inner child that thought, maybe if I share this, maybe those sick, evil people will change. Maybe they'll stop being so evil. No. No, they won't. It's not even for them. And I had to sit with my inner child and comfort my inner child. And I've seen enough human behavior to realize that people who hate themselves and hate others, they're not the ones who are going to change. Now, that doesn't mean they're not capable of course, everyone is capable. But realistically, sometimes there's just not even enough time in your lifetime to change if you've operated a certain way for so long. And it would have to distort your entire system if you've based yourself off of being controlled by demons and feeling this false sense of power. That's a lot to give up. And even though it's hollow and fake, that's what a lot of people know. So I don't expect evil people to change their ways. But the inner child always hopes that. That's why we get into these relationships with people who play out our parental experiences of how we were treated in childhood, because we're trying to create change. We're trying to heal that. But the way to heal it is inward, is within ourselves, not externally. Once we heal it internally, then it shows up externally as a healed, matched version of that. So I had to sit with my inner child and say, listen, I've seen enough human behavior to know that people who hate themselves, they will almost rebel against your desire for them to help. If you ask them for a cup of water, even if they have a cup of water, they'll drink it right in front of you, just to show you how ridiculous you were for even asking them for a cup of water, and to show you just how dedicated they are to the hate that they have ensued. So I had to really sit with my inner child and just say, I got you. Don't worry about if anyone else is going to watch this and feel what you feel. I feel it with you. And so there has been a fear of feelings, because if you have to sit with the pain, it's very uncomfortable. And so our society has left this invisible labor for the feminine to do. This has gone on for eons. Masculines will have their ego triggered, and they'll start an unnecessary war. And what has happened for a long time is they will abandon the feminines, right? They'll leave their castle to go fight somebody or to go steal something from someone else. And meanwhile, they've left the feminine and the children unprotected. And at the same time, they return back home with their PTSD, with their unhealed trauma, and they expect to still have the same privileges and rights and access to the feminine, to the portal, to the divine, to all of these different things, to be the head of the house, when they haven't worked through their issues. They haven't worked through their traumas, and they insist on infecting everything and everyone around them with their pain and their trauma. And so often the feminine is abandoned, having to do all the work for two on her own. Often the feminine is also having to cope with decisions being made without her consent or without her suggestion or input even mattering. So she's lived most of her life invisible. And that is a part of being a wounded womb man. And so when we go back to understand, why has it been set up this way? Why has it been set up this way? Well, in my opinion, it is the masculine trying to evade its own shadow. See, they'll leave the feminine unprotected. They'll throw the feminine under the bus as soon as they get a chance. We see that in the creation story. You know, with Adam, it was the woman. It was the woman you gave me. Not me. It was the woman. The first opportunity, right under that bus. So, what happened is, there's so many layers to this. So many layers to it. And I would encourage you to have these conversations amongst yourself. But one of the things that happened was masculines had to feel that guilt of, wow, I literally just threw the gift that I was given. I was out here alone, using the Adam and Eve storyline. I'm out here alone. I'm given this precious gift, and I abandon it. I put the blame all on her. I throw her right under the bus at the first chance. Instead of sitting with that emotional pain of guilt, of remorse, of what other feelings show up, the masculine energy will I just got to bypass this. I just got to muscle through. That didn't happen. So there's an aversion to feelings. There's an aversion to feeling the depth. And again, the feminine is left with having to feel the depth because it doesn't just go away. That pain still exists somewhere. So who has to feel that pain? You know? And not to mention, this was not even his first wife. This was his second. If you understand the story of Lilith. The hidden story of Lilith. Lilith wasn't able to be controlled. She was not going to put up with this. So this feeling of failure, feeling not enough, feeling of inadequacy, all those very triggering words to the masculine consciousness, instead of facing it, typically the masculine will run. And you'll see this in those runner-chaser dynamics. You'll see this in pretty much most of society, where the masculine will run from his own pain. I mean, even an example of an innocent childhood movie, favorite of mine actually, The Lion King. He's told to run away, and he does, you know, and stays away. And even when knowing it might be better to face this head on, there's still a part that wants to run away. And so that requires tapping into your feminine energy to be comfortable with these uncomfortable emotions that will arise, without needing to bring anyone else in to heal you, without needing to involve or bypass or manipulate your way out of the situation, but to sit with it. That requires sitting with the darkness, which is the gift of the womb man. So, a lot of times the masculine energy operates from fear. The fear of, you know, that's why the woman was blamed immediately. It was because of fear. It was that fear of, I know that I'm responsible here. I know that I was given this verdict here, but I'm going to be afraid. And fear makes people do irrational things. So I don't say any of this in a blame kind of way or a shame on them or any of that. It's really just to understand why these energies are, where they come from, and how can we move through them and heal through them. What is done is done. Let's move forward together. Let's move forward. So as I mentioned, there's a psychological fear, and the masculine has been running from this since that creation story, running from the karma that they would have to face for so many atrocities. But as I've mentioned, once the feminine energy started to rise, once you stop saying no, you stop agreeing to abuse, that abuse has to return back to sender. That's part of the natural law. But as long as you agree to the abuse will continue to flow to you. But those who say, I will not tolerate this, it returns back to sender. There's no address for you. So one of the other ways that the masculine has a fear of becoming a woman, this is something I've noticed for men who are homophobic. Homophobia amongst men is really the fear of being treated as a woman, the fear of being dominated, the fear of being less than, the fear of being used in a way that they didn't agree to. So all of this shows up in these subconscious ways. And as I've mentioned, a lot of darkness has arisen. And one of those things has been revealed by CNN. And I first found it by someone I follow. And a lot of these women have more cahoons than most of these beta masculine energies who are too afraid to stand up to the evil, who are these yes men, who are these good guys, who are these sheep in wolf clothing kind of people, who are cowards essentially. And again, do you, that's fine if that's how people want to live. However, it's placed a burden on others to rise up. And so I saw this woman talking about it, and she was really just calling these people out, like, you know, like squad up kind of vibe, like let's go. And I was just like, I love that. However, I would love to see a masculine talking about this. Is there any masculine talking about this? And I found one, or one showed up on my feed. And I thought, okay, I'm glad that someone's addressing it. But he still wasn't calling it out in the ways that she was. He still was just doing the bare minimum of what he could be saying. And then at the very end, a video about women and the abuse of women, he still decided to make it about himself and show himself about a video of a gun that he posted, putting away his gun or whatever, and needed to show off his six-pack and all this stuff. And I'm like, even the people who think they get it really don't. So the way to understand is through humility, by being humble, by being curious, to understand what is your counterpart, your feminine, going through. What would it be like to walk in her shoes? Because when you have a fear of yourself and a fear of the feminine, you are cutting yourself off from understanding yourself fully. You can't be a whole human being with these fractures and with these fears. So understand that a lot of times people will love others the way they want to be loved. So in this example, men need to be needed. So the reason our entire society is set up the way it is because men need to be needed. They will set up, back in the olden times, marriages. Women can't own land. Women can't make decisions. And if her husband dies, guess what? She has to marry someone else. As gross and toxic as it is, she has to marry someone else because he's a man who's going to inherit all the wealth. And so all of these things have set men up to be needed. And what happened with the polarization shift of women being able to be more empowered is they realize, actually, I don't need you. And that is very insulting to a fragile masculine ego, because it hits upon the inner child wound. And it's a unique dynamic. And again, it manifests differently for individuals. So it's really a lot of trauma that has formulated these beliefs. But men need to feel needed. And if you tell him he's not needed, he feels insulted. And that can either make him rise to the occasion of being an equal partner who doesn't need to be needed, or we see the opposite, where he sulks, he becomes abusive, he becomes dismissive, he goes, fine, I'm not going to help you anyway. He becomes basically a toxic feminine, because that's where the womb man is. That's where the wound is. It's in your feminine energy. And until you embrace the feminine within yourself, how can you expect to embrace a feminine? How can you expect to be worthy of embracing a feminine? You have to embrace yourself first. So, with the women who have romantic relationships, for example, with masculines, they're not saying they don't love you. They're saying they don't need you, which enters a new perspective of they want you. They don't need you, they choose you. They don't need you, they want you. And that brings on a whole nother list of fears. Because if you've been taught you're only needed for what you do, not for who you are, you're only needed for how much you have in your bank account, not for what's in your heart. You're only needed for the safety and stability you can provide, not for the beautiful being you are. That brings up a whole lot of fears. What do you mean you just want me? No! Like, it freaks the masculine out, especially those who have more avoidant patterns, because they were taught that love isn't for them. They avoid it like the plague. And so the masculine who is not needed gets very confused, because love has always meant you were needed. You were a good little boy when you did the chores. You were a good little boy when you get the grades or whatever it was, or you had all the girls or whatever it was. You felt needed by all of those superficial things, but you never felt wanted. You never felt chosen. And so when someone actually shows up and says, actually, I just want you, I just choose you, it brings up all those fears. All those fears of abandonment, all those fears of good enough, all of those fears. And so we've entered into this male loneliness pandemic where either masculines feel victimized by this. They feel victimized by the fact that women would actually want them and not only need them. And they feel insulted that they're no longer needed, and irritated that they have to rise to the occasion of being an equal partner, meaning you're going to have to feel the pain just as much as she does. You're going to have to communicate and be willing to work through things just as much as she will be, and vice versa. So a lot of these things arise because the feminine energy can't be controlled. We've lived in a world that's based on logic and knowledge and facts. And the feminine energy teaches us to live from our heart space. And a lot of times people will try to tell you to use logic for matters of the heart. If you want a romantic relationship, you're going to have to use your heart. Your brain is going to be telling you one thing. You're really going to have to use both. You're going to have to follow your soul's compass, your heart, your mind. But primarily, when it comes to matters of the heart, that is going to be a major focus of your guide and pulse, your compass. And so a lot of businesses will value logic. And we need logic as well, but we need balance more so. When you aren't attuned to the rhythms of the world, you're missing a whole lot that you could be uncovering. There's so much profit and so much beauty and abundance that we could be having. But because we've only been taught through a patriarchal mindset, through logic, through facts, through force, we aren't taught how to flow. we aren't taught how to be okay with mystery. The masculine has this intense need to know. I just need to know. I need to know. That's not how you're going to figure it out. You have to learn how to flow. Learn how to trust. Learn how to hear, receive the guidance of your intuition. And there are a few masculines that you'll see. One of those masculines I'm thinking of as an example, my ascended master, Jesus, right? His stepfather, Joseph, he was attuned to his feminine energy. In order to be Jesus' father, right, you have to be someone who would be a decent enough, worthy person to stepfather him, and to be worthy of someone as pure and honorable as Mary. So Joseph was always described as a stand-up kind of person. And he understood the feminine energy. So he was given dreams and visions and things that usually only the feminines were receiving. But he was able to tap into this. So I say that as an example so you know that it's possible. It is possible. And there's a lot to learn from the feminine energy. And right now the feminine energy needs protection. Because there is a spiritual war and it's a physical war. And it is to monopolize, manipulate, and control the portal. And these portals in the physical realm are called stargates. Now I had a previous guest, Marie Major, who actually has spoken about stargates on her Instagram. If you want to follow her, check that out. But I also found other podcasts that have been talking about the stargates and have been talking about the power of melanated people and indigenous people. And so right now there are a lot of evil entities that want to overpower and override these systems they've been manipulating for eons. And so something I'm going to leave for you as I get ready to move through this pre-game 420 day. Something I'm going to leave for you. If you are a feminine and you've experienced narcissistic abuse, I'm going to leave you a sacred energy clearing to clear your womb. It is powerful and it is needed. So please listen to it and embody this. You are safe, you are protected, and you are well. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and I will see you until next time. Be well.